Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is already Friday. Where can I fit this? Right here. Friday, October 25th. And in this video, I'm going to be working on this originally it was called Sketching Sci-Fi from Imagination, and I'll put a link to it in the description. And as I often do, I usually work on like whatever sketch that I do a video of, I usually do more work on it, and so that's what I did here. And in that one, in the previous video, I sketched this out from imagination, and then I looked up aliens, like pictures from the movies and stuff, and so yeah, I added like the drop ship and like this marine guy's kind of made up, but I'm gonna work on that a little bit. I looked up like what the xenomorph looks like, and also just made it look more like a unified illustration. And so I'm gonna touch this up a bit and just kind of go from there. But if you are new to my channel and my videos, I sketch every day and I make videos every day, and I use a 5-minute timer to stay focused. So I'll start a 5-minute timer and go from there. And as I touch up this part, it'll allow me to kind of talk about stuff because I think there's some good information here, but I also want to like draw more stuff down here, but I don't know if I'll get to that. So just speaking of like touching up, well, one, I found the white marker. So the tools that I use, just to go over them again, I might have gone over them in the previous video, but just in general, these are kind of like the tools that I use. So in this sketch, and I still consider this a sketch, however, you can have a pretty nice sketch and it would work as like a color comp, I think that's what it's called, or a color study, where if you really wanted to, one, either take this into the computer and make it look better, or do like another painting where you just use it as inspiration so that you don't have to think about the colors so much and like the composition and everything, or just have like a nice color sketch. In general, I always use this medium point, and I don't even remember when I started. I think I ran out of, I usually use, well, before this, I used a precise, like a roller ball, but then I either ran out or like maybe it didn't work that good on the sketchbook I was using or something, and so I just stuck with this for, it's been a while since, like, that I've been using this, but I like it. I like it a lot, actually. But I tend to stick with like a certain tool for a while so that I really figure out how to use it. For smaller details, I'll use this, like a fine liner. I've started using more like brush type stuff, brush pens. There's a few different ones. I don't use Sharpie, well, I use the color Sharpies, but I don't use the black Sharpies as much, just because I have like the felt tip one. But yeah, I use color Sharpies, like the color Sharpie, and also these Sharpie creative markers are nice. So speaking of the star thing, so that's something you can do to, and this is something they like to do in the old school sci-fi paintings, like the John Burke type stuff, which is pretty fun. It works like magic. You add stars and immediately you have space. So that's kind of a fun thing to sketch, actually. Get this out of the way. What else? I worked on the planet. Basically, they're spheres. You just make them look like spheres with different textures. I did want to touch up this space station thing a little bit. Just basically work on the scale and like the form a little bit. I'm not gonna do too much. I feel like stuff like this, like once you get like the initial idea down, it's good to kind of look up some reference. But like if you, well, first of all, I mean, I saw stuff like this, and so I imagined it anyway. This clip is not working, is it? No. So that's 5 minutes. So, like I've said in previous videos, just when you are drawing from imagination, just put as much like as you can imagine. But that kind of leads me to what I did kind of want to talk about just as I'm working on this, is that it occurred to me that like people's imaginations, I mean, it works differently. Like for me, like my imagination, I can imagine a lot in my mind. So if there's such a thing as like talent, maybe that's my talent, is like I'm visual. So that, yeah, I can conjure up a lot of stuff that I've seen. I can imagine it, I can remember. And so it's just a matter of my like hand being able to draw the thing that I'm imagining. So there's that, which, yeah, like it occurred to me that not everybody does that. But some people, I think, like I get better at it too the more I practice it. So there's that. Like some people would get better at that if they would practice it. So that's something that I keep in mind. But then the other thing is also, yeah, some people, that's just not like how their mind kind of works. Just like my mind doesn't tend to remember a lot of technical details. Like I'm just not like that. Like I tend to learn things by doing it by hand and visualizing it and then just doing it. And then the technical stuff kind of comes after. So for example, like I'll know how to draw something, but I might not know like the anatomical, like, technical like terms or details. So that's kind of how I work. So that's just something that occurred to me. The other thing was that, well, along the same lines, maybe I get a lot more joy out of drawing stuff from imagination than, say, someone else. So you may not enjoy it as much. It may be more of a challenge. So that's something I also kind of realized. And I realized these things because I'm doing these videos, which if I wasn't, then I would just do things however I felt like doing it. And in general, I mean, I do stuff the way I feel like doing it, but I also understand that the videos I want to be helpful, I mean, to different people. The other thing I wanted to do was kind of, okay, so since I am using color, it's kind of another topic, I guess. The color like helps. I mean, it sort of unifies things, but it can also separate. So for example, this is supposed to be some kind of spaceship, but like to me, it sort of blends with this part, and so I kind of need to separate it a little bit more. Plus I wanted to add more of the green, kind of like that color. So there's different green. I used this one. I'm just gonna kind of put it sparingly. As I do this, the other thing I wanted to bring up was how, like, I haven't worked on this since that day, since the 17th, since I made that video, and then I just, after I recorded the video, I just kind of looked up aliens stuff. And that's what I mean about, there's nothing wrong with using reference as far as, I mean, it's fun. I mean, I'm already drawing, like, it's basically fan art, I guess. But it kind of isn't, because I made up, like, a lot of it, so it kind of becomes like a comic. Like, if I were to work on a comic set in this universe. So it kind of takes it a little bit beyond just fan art. But yeah, like this, for example, well, the coloring is coming from imagination. So just in general, like when you're doing that kind of work, like imagination, well, I'll just call it imaginative. It's kind of important to take it as far as you can and then just kind of let it sit for a bit and then come back to it. And as far as your deadline or whatever, I mean, that's kind of its own thing. But I mean, if you don't have like a deadline, like I don't have a deadline to do this drawing, then I'll just let it kind of sit for a while and work on it when I feel like it, because then you can see the picture a little bit more, like what would look cool. So for example, I might just do this much and then I can see that like it's okay. I mean, like the colors are okay, but if I kept just making myself do it, I would most likely overwork it as I tend to do. And that's kind of the problem whenever you're like doing freelance type stuff, which I used to do. I don't want to do it anymore. It's because you have these deadlines and you force yourself to do it, and then your work is never as satisfactory as you'd like it to be because you rushed. But then nowadays it seems like that's what AI is being used for. So to me, it's like good riddance. Like I'm not in AI anyway, so I don't want to compete with that kind of thing. So I'll just leave that for now. The other thing is, why is it the one marker that you need is always the one that's missing? I'm looking for like a red color. I don't want to use pink. It's weird. But I was was gonna put a little bit of like red dots. So going back to what I was saying about like the blending, I don't know if you can see it, but I kind of put the, I think it's called the APC, that vehicle. But I like how that's in the background. So like the color, see how I have like the green, like that actually affects the visually, like where it sits. So I'm gonna get rid of that by adding blue maybe. So I'm gonna use blue because this blue seems to be like suggesting the background. So I'm just gonna put blue. Just something to think about, and like you can be pretty sparing with that. So what else? Oh, I didn't set a timer. Well, let me start another 5-minute timer. What else can I talk about? Well, one thing is like with the alien, it's basically mixed media. So I sketched it out with this, and then I went in with like one of the brush pens. This one's sort of running out a little bit. And just kind of doing a dry brush on it, which lends itself to the alien, the xenomorph, because it has so many organic details to them. And yeah, they're pretty fun to draw. So that's kind of how I did that, and then just used so there's different kinds. This is from Alien, I think. There was like a chart that had all the different ones. So the one from Alien had like a see-through skull area. So I just kind of used gray to suggest that. Like this gray marker. But as a color sketch, I mean, it's cool, and then you kind of learn how you would do this more if you wanted to do it more rendered. And that kind of takes me to my next point that I was thinking about. Was that, well, this goes back to the idea of the AOS triad, as I call it. And I guess I'll link that too. But it's just my way of conceptualizing the idea of drawing from imagination, which is how I started this sketch, this page. And just personally, that's the most fun for me, and that's what I'm sharing with these videos, aside from doing the daily sketching habit, which is important also. But I think just doing that, the daily habits, is good for anything. I mean, I use it for writing, for other stuff. So there's that. But then the other thing is just personally, just drawing from imagination is probably like the most inner child, like, fun thing. So for me, like, I'm okay with just doing that. But then I also realized, just like realizing that people like visualize things differently, imagine things differently, like our minds work differently. I also realized that for some people, sketchy or stuff from imagination doesn't really like do it for them, I guess. And so going back to the AOS triad concept, so drawing stuff from imagination for me is fun, but it may not be commercial or something like that, is my point. And so the next thing would be like study, which improves your drawing from imagination because it adds to your imagination. So that's my point. Now for some people, like I was saying, they may not be able to remember a whole lot like visually, like in their imagination. I think it's called aphantasia, I believe. I'm gonna add some red here. So these Sharpies, they're more transparent. The other one is more opaque. So that's 5 minutes. I'll start to wrap up the video, but let me finish my point, I guess. So for people who aren't able to like remember visually in their imagination, the study isn't really for that. Like, whereas for me, if I'm doing studies from reference, I'm going to remember it just because that's the way my imagination works. I can remember visually, like what I saw. And so that's a big benefit, like for me to do studies, is so I get better at drawing from imagination. I'm not wanting to mess up the alien here. That's why I have to stop talking for a second. And that's kind of what I mean, like visually, like when I start to just access that part where I'm seeing things visually, like the verbal part goes away. But yeah, for people who do studies, maybe the benefit for them to do the study is to go towards in the triad, there's imagination, there's study, and there's style. So a style is stuff like how you render a piece, like that style. So for somebody that draws from imagination and just likes to invent stuff like that, then the style might be more loose. It might be more like sketchy because it's really about coming up with ideas, concepts, like that kind of thing. Whereas the person that studies but wants to draw sort of kind of like figure drawing where it looks like real people or something, it would be helpful for that, like that, because that's a style. Because even if you draw very realistically, like it's still not that realistic is my point. So you can go over some, like lighten up some areas if the color sort of messed up the values, but also if you want to just kind of add texture. So hopefully that made sense, what I was saying, that the style is like if you're working from life, for example, like you're studying, but then your final piece looks very realistic, like you drew it from life, and so that's a style. That's not it's not inherently superior by doing that. Just like if you're somebody that can just draw stuff from imagination, it may look more sketchy. If I wanted this to look more realistic, I'd probably look up reference to make it more realistic. But even if I didn't, it kind of lends itself to comics, for example, because in comics, stuff looking like very realistic doesn't really make a good comic. Not really. It can look pretty boring, actually. Comics sort of lends itself to cartoony stuff. But yeah, sometimes you can pull off like a very realistic look if you're like really good. Like Alex Ross is kind of like that. I believe that's his name. That I can think of that sort of pulls off like a very realistic look, but still make it interesting. But a lot of times when I see people do like very realistic comics, it's kind of boring. It looks stiff. It looks static. Like they're like illustrations. Yeah, I'm gonna start to wrap up the video. The 5 minutes is almost up. As usual, I want to, as always, not usual, but I want to thank you for joining me for our daily sketching routine. Hopefully you come back, and thanks for supporting the channel. I appreciate that. And until next time, keep on sketching.